All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're deconstructing a really fascinating anonymous expert report about a major federal court ruling. Now, this ruling strikes right at the heart of a highly controversial federal agency policy, specifically a massive application freeze. But look, we aren't just going to skim the surface level story here. We're going to deeply analyze the core legal ideas, the hidden mechanics of administrative power, and those non-obvious cause and effect relationships that really dictate what this ruling actually means for the system at large. Let's dive right in. Right off the bat, we've got to ask ourselves the central legal question that kicked off this entire legal battle. When exactly does an administrative delay cross the line and become an unlawful suspension? It's really about that super delicate balance between a federal agency's inherent discretion to, manage its own workflow and its strict statutory duty to actually perform the job it was created to do in the first place. At what point does a simple pause in the paperwork become a systemic refusal to govern? Okay, let's jump straight into Section 1, the indefinite suspension mechanism. So, according to this expert report, the Federal Immigration Agency implemented an official policy instructing its officers to essentially halt all final determinations for immigration benefit requests. But here is the absolutely crucial detail. This applied specifically to individuals from 39 separate countries. The implicit assumption the agency made here is just massive. They were operating under the belief that they possessed this unlimited categorical discretion to stall adjudications indefinitely, purely based on nationality, without ever issuing any final decisions. And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates the mechanical paradox of their whole policy. Let's break it down. Step 1. The agency officially accepts the application. Step 2. They go ahead and cash the applicant's filing fees. But then, Step 3. They withhold the final determination indefinitely. This exposes a system that's actively extracting financial resources from applicants without actually executing the corresponding legal duty to provide a final answer. No yes, no no, just nothing. Think about the immense cause and effect relationship this creates. I mean, when an agency takes your money, but flat out refuses to process your request, you are pushed straight into an administrative black hole. The report emphasizes that this indefinite freeze forces massive cascading uncertainties onto these specific applicants. Without a clear timeline or even a basic guarantee of a decision, these folks are trapped in a systemic limbo. It literally paralyzes their ability to plan their lives, their careers, or figure out their legal statuses. Moving right along to Section 2, analyzing the judicial ruling. So we have a stark contrast in play here. On one side, you have the agency's implicit assumption, this belief that they hold the ultimate discretion to halt or delay processing whenever they see fit. But countering that is the cold, hard legal reality established by the federal court. Administrative agencies have a strict statutory obligation to issue final adjudications. The court looked at the agency's assumed power and effectively drew a hard boundary right in the sand, based entirely on administrative law. In fact, the judge delivered a legal finding that absolutely shatters the government's justification for this categorical freeze. They said, the agency does not have discretion to decide not to adjudicate at all. Wow. I mean, that is a foundational legal reality check. You can delay for administrative reasons, sure, totally fine. But you cannot institutionally decide to simply stop doing your job indefinitely. That is straight up unlawful. But hang on a second. This is where we need to look a little closer at the data. 83. That is the specific number of plaintiffs who actually brought this lawsuit forward and successfully obtained this ruling. Now, why does this specific number matter so much? Because it leads us directly into the most critical, non-obvious insight of this entire analysis. Which brings us to Section 3, direct versus systemic implications. We really have to separate the direct impact from the non-obvious reality here. The direct impact? The judge ordered the agency to immediately resume work on the applications for those 83 specific plaintiffs. They won their case, which is great for them. However, the non-obvious reality is that the judge did not issue a blanket injunction. There was absolutely no nationwide halt ordered against this policy. So what does that mean? It means if you're from one of those 39 countries, but you aren't one of those lucky 83 plaintiffs, well, you remain stuck in that processing limbo.
And this is exactly what you should take away from this explainer today. A favorable ruling at a federal court does not automatically equate to a blanket policy reversal. It is incredibly easy to just scroll past a headline that says, "Judge rules freeze unlawful," and assume, oh, the system's been fixed overnight. Actually, scratch that. It's not that simple. The expert report explicitly warns us against this misinterpretation. Systemic, widespread change requires way more than a limited, plaintiff-specific legal victory.
All right, let's wrap things up with Section 4, Strategic Projections and Precedent.
So what happens next? The expert report maps out 3 actionable strategic projections regarding how the federal agency might actually respond to having their policy declared unlawful. First, the agency could attempt to revise or amend the suspension policy to find some kind of legal loophole that bypasses the judge's logic. Second, they could aggressively appeal the court's decision to a higher circuit to fiercely protect their assumed discretionary powers. Or third, they could just read the writing on the wall and terminate the freeze entirely across the board, avoiding a massive wave of identical lawsuits from other applicants. We don't know for sure yet which path they're going to take, but those are the structural options currently sitting on the table.
And that brings us back to the core attention of this entire analysis. Where is the true balance of power between administrative agencies and judicial oversight? This ruling proves that while agencies hold immense power to stall and freeze lives through procedural limbo, the judicial system can in fact still force them to do their statutory duty. But here's the big question. When a major legal victory only actually applies to 83 people at a time, is the system genuinely working? That is the systemic implication I want to leave you pondering today. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the mechanics behind the headlines.